Welcome to Humanist Views, a program where we look at current issues from a humanist point of view. I'm Scott Lohman. On tonight's program, we're going to take a look at one of the religions that's generally considered to be a little more cultish than your standard mainstream religions, but gets in the news by some of the things that their believers have as their doctrines and dogmas and some of the issues they deal with, but also the fact that it's very interesting as to what happens when people leave that particular cult. Tonight we're going to talk about Jehovah's Witnesses, and I have as my guest James Zimmerman.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, James. And James is currently editor, and what else do you do for Minnesota Atheists?
Yeah, that's about it. Well, I host their
a cable
talk show
program
sometimes, yeah.
And you're editor of their newsletter. So,
yep.
But you're also important for this. You're an ex-Jehovah's Witness.
I am, yeah. I think that makes me an expert on this topic.
It's going to make you more of an expert than me. So let's just get into the basics. Let's just some core things of what makes them different from, say, your average Baptist or Lutheran or Catholic.
Okay. Well, one of the main things is that maybe this doesn't make them different from other religions, but they believe that they're God's mouthpiece here on earth.
Okay.
They back that up by calling themselves part of the Jeremiah class, comparing themselves to the prophet Jeremiah of the Hebrew scriptures. And they basically feel that their publications that they publish out of the Watchtower Society, their headquarters in Brooklyn, New York, are basically an interpretation of the scriptures made applicable for common or modern day humans.
Okay. And the Watchtower is their main magazine that they distribute.
Yeah, they publish all sorts of things, books, brochures, even DVDs, books on tape now, but the main thing they're known for is the Watchtower magazine.
And that'll get dropped off. I've seen that, like when I used to use laundromats. There you would find copies of that there.
I've left them at laundromats. Witnesses are supposed to report how much time they spend in that proselytizing activity, and besides just reporting the actual hours they spend, they also note how many magazines they give out and books, and they can kind of cheat by leaving them in the homes of people who are not home or dropping them off at magazines and in doctor's office waiting rooms. So you can beef up your numbers that way.
Okay, so one of the tenets as a believer, you would have to do some evangelism or go out and proselytize?
Yeah, they call it going out in service. Predominantly it means going door to door, knocking on residential homes, but they also try to go to businesses or in larger cities. In downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul here, you'll see them going up and down the streets, just approaching people real briefly because they know people are usually in a rush if they're walking around in downtown. But they're also taught to make known their religion to their schoolmates and workmates and get them to talk about God and the Bible.
Which is much more interesting because we humanists, and I know sometimes atheists we're not very proselytizing or evangelical when it comes to that stuff. We tend to be live and let live types. So that sort of puts us at a slight disadvantage when we're not out doing there. But
yeah.
Since you were a believer, you were raised in the religion, correct?
Yep. Yeah, as were my parents. So there's a long history of Jehovah's Witnesses on both sides of my family.
And so what then started you moving away from that religion?
Well, a lot of, they teach you to really research your faith and to find out the facts. And generally what that means is read their magazines and their publications. But I often went further. So finding things that didn't quite fit in, such as with their beliefs regarding science, were in conflict with actual science. And then once my son was born, and my wife also had been having many doubts, and we just decided it was not the way we wanted to raise our son.
And that's got to be tough, because this religion does some things that others don't for people who leave it, correct?
Yeah, they shun people if you leave the religion, and especially if you talk about the religion or just talk against the religion, or even just about it like we're doing right now. They shun former members. And that even goes down to friends and even close family members too. So I have a lot of relatives, including all of my grandparents are still alive actually, but they don't have anything to do with me. There's a couple exceptions, but most of them just shun us completely.
That to me strikes me as a very odd thing to do in a religion, but it also then I think it puts it closer to the cult end of it because of that insularity and then the being really nasty to the people who leave.
Yeah, one thing that kind of goes back to the first aspect we talked about is that they believe that the Watchtower Society is God's mouthpiece, and they don't allow your own interpretation on scriptures, and they don't allow independent thinking. So I think if I was raised, if you're raised Catholic and you leave Catholicism, that's okay if you talk to your Catholic family and you have a different opinion, because you can talk to your Catholic mom and tell her why you think birth control is acceptable. And if she comes to agree with you, that's fine. She can still be a Catholic. But as a witness, there can be no other interpretation, even if it's something really small, like if I say, I don't think Adam and Eve were really historical figures, or I think the story of Jesus walking on water is a myth. The other 99.9% of the Bible is all accurate, but I think that part is a myth. They would still kick you out of the religion if you tried encouraging people to engage in that kind of dialogue.
Wow, that just on those really small things, because you can even find some Baptists that get a little leery about some of those things.
Yeah, there's nothing open for interpretation.
So, you've got some notes. So is there the final authority? They were big on end times.
Yes, they're very big on end times. In fact, they've consistently preached that the end of the world is any day now, that it's right around the corner. Sometimes I even heard them say, we've already turned the corner and we're facing it head on. In fact, in their book, Millions Now Living Will Never Die, which they published in 1920, they said, we may confidently expect that 1925 will mark the return of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the faithful prophets of old. So they were wrong. And then I think we have an image of their watchtower from May of 1984, where they show a picture of several elderly people, and they say, the generation that saw the events of 1914, who were around to witness, say, World War I, they will be the last generation to see this wicked world before God steps in and gets rid of all the evil people. Well, as an interesting side point, everyone who's pictured on that cover has now died. So they were, I don't mean any disrespect to them, but the Watchtower Society was clearly wrong about that. The generation of 1914 is gone. I mean, there might be some people who are centenarians now, but the generation is pretty much gone.
So that was one of those cases where they're, predicting things that they've repeated, obviously they've been repeatedly wrong. Now, what approach are they taking towards the end times? Are they still as fervent, but are they less exact on things?
Yeah, it's interesting how it's evolved if you read their literature over time. For example, back in the 60s, right up through the 80s, when I was a little kid, they said that people, like that watchtower we showed, they say people who saw the events of 1914 will still be alive when Armageddon commences. But then by the 1990s, they were saying people who were alive in 1914, which is different, because if you saw the events of 1914, you're probably at least a teenager, right?
Yes, exactly.
But if you were alive in 1914, you could have been born on New Year's Eve in 1914 and still qualify. Well, lately they've changed it again, and they said the people who were born in 1914 will overlap with the generation, which really stretches it out there, because if you were born in 1914, you're 98 years old now.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter is 1, so she overlaps with those people, and she could live to be 100. So it could still be a century away. So they try to say that it's imminent still, but that's really stretched it out now.
So do they believe in what some of the other conservative Christians believe in, this rapture, where the true believers are going to be whipped out of the earth and the rest of us are going to get tormented?
No, they don't believe in the rapture. They don't think that the rapture is a scriptural teaching, but they do believe in something similar, that soon Jesus, as directed by his Father, will step in and Armageddon will commence, which is like an all-out war in which all the wicked people are destroyed, and so are their children. The Watchtower Society points out that even children and even people who are ignorant, if that's their only, that might be their only crime, just that they're ignorant of the truth of Jehovah's Witnesses. So when I say evil, I don't just mean like mass murderers or megalomaniac dictators. I mean even people who maybe were born and raised in Sri Lanka and knew nothing but Buddhism and Hinduism. They were ignorant. So they and their children will be murdered by Jesus, and the Jehovah's Witnesses, or people who are good, will remain on the earth as it's brought back to a paradise. So they don't think that they will be raptured up to heaven. They also don't believe in eternal suffering. So these people who are killed by Jesus won't suffer in a lake of fire. Their punishment is eternal because they'll be dead.
They'll be dead,
yeah, but they won't suffer forever. So in that way, it's slightly better.
It's a little better than the other version. You get thrown into the lake of fire and then you're roasted for a very long time. So I think that's the thing. But they've also had a number, too, of how many people are going to be going to heaven. Yeah,
that's a subtle doctrine that they have, is that they teach that 144,000 people will rule with Jesus in heaven. But any number of people can live on earth.
Okay.
So their reasoning is only a few people are going to go to heaven because they will rule when, that's the image there is showing Armageddon, and
Yep.
that's the good news that they're bringing when they go door to door, is this peaceful this peaceful scenario that will play out any day now.
That shows the earth glowing
Yes,
up.
so
yes.
that will rid the earth of evil toddlers and people who have ignorantly practiced Buddhism their whole life, yes. But they teach that 144,000 people will rule with Jesus in heaven. So that's what heaven is it's equivalent to Washington, D.C., but the rest of the people are down on earth, and they're the subjects of God's government.
Okay, so they're going to be like the great administrators of the whole project.
Yeah, they believe the apostles, the original 12 apostles, are among those 144,000. They believe that Paul and Timothy are of that, and they, of course, think the governing body of the Watchtower Society is among that. And other people basically self-proclaim that. So it's a very low minority of people. In fact, when I was in Burnsville congregation, there was 150 to 200 people in the congregation. Not a single one of them thought they were going to heaven. That includes me. I never thought that about myself, and none of my parents or grandparents thought that either. When I was in Wheelock Parkway congregation in St. Paul, again, a congregation of about 100 people, there was one woman who believed that she had the hope of going to heaven once she died, or once Armageddon commenced if she was still alive at that point. So it's really a small minority.
Okay, so it's not like some of the ones that when they feel they're saved, that they're really part of the elect, and the rest of us are the ones in trouble on that. So it sounds like congregations aren't really huge. Is that kind of average in terms of congregation size?
Yeah, it is. They again say that that's to their credit because it makes a more intimate surrounding. The elders, who are generally half a dozen to a dozen of the men in the congregation, get to know the sheep in the congregation better. It gives people more of an opportunity to do different tasks because there's a small rotation. So there's no mega churches among the witnesses.
Okay.
I would say in most of the United States, your congregations are going to be between 1 and 200 people. And in some rural areas way out, out of the Twin Cities here, there's some that are quite a bit smaller. A good friend of mine used to attend one out in Nelson, Wisconsin, that had about 35 adults there. So.
Wow, so that does give the leaders a little more knowledge of who their people are and who's then, say, drifting away.
Yeah, they really know you well, so it's hard to fade into the woodwork in the congregations.
Okay. Some of the other things you mentioned is that Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate holidays.
Yeah, they don't celebrate any holidays. You can divide them up into two aspects. There's the patriotic holidays, Veterans Day, Independence Day. Well, they think that these governments are evil. They are ruled by Satan. God allows them to exist on the world for now, and we need to respect them. We pay our taxes. We don't spit on our politicians when they walk by, but witnesses say we don't follow them. We don't submit to their authority. So they don't vote, and they don't celebrate holidays that are supposed to bring up patriotic feelings among people. And then, of course, there's religious holidays. Well, they all say that those have pagan origins, or that they've gotten away from the original scriptures. So as a consequence, they don't celebrate or do anything special for Valentine's Day, Halloween, Christmas, Easter.
Which can make it interesting, because a lot of the rest of us, even those of us who are atheists and aren't looking at the holidays as a holy day, where the term came from, but more of a chance to get together with family and do that kind of thing. Yeah,
I agree. Once we left the Witnesses and we considered ourselves more secular humanists, it was nice to finally get to celebrate Christmas with my wife's family. Many people in my wife's family are Catholic, but they have no trouble with us being there. Sometimes they pray before the meal. I don't join them in that, but I just stand respectfully quiet. But yeah, I enjoy the meal. We swap gifts. We have a good time. So it's nice. Yeah.
There's lots of humanists that have fun with that kind of stuff. I know ones that go to church so that they can sing the Christmas songs in that time of year, because they enjoy them so much. Which
that's not me, but yeah.
No, it's not me either. But that's a neat quirk about us humanists and atheists on that, is that we've got those odd interests. And the other thing is not celebrating birthdays.
Yeah, that's. Even when I was a witness, that was one of the most shakiest doctrines I thought that they had. If you ask a witness, and the next time they come to your door, ask them, because they just don't have a good answer. One thing they say is that there's 2 birthdays mentioned in the Bible, and they both ended badly. Which, here's a good thing you can say. Yeah. Dogs are mentioned in the Bible about 40 times, always in a negative light. They're eating a corpse, or they're returning to their vomit, or the wicked have become like dogs. So maybe we shouldn't own dogs either. Maybe we should stone them if we see them in the street. So it's a poor bit of reasoning. They also don't like that it exalts one individual. They say we're supposed to be humble. We don't need to stand out in the limelight. Okay, that makes sense. I can go with that. But
Yeah.
the problem is they're okay with baby showers, graduation parties, retirement parties. Their wedding receptions are just as fun and lively as any other religion. So they don't mind exalting this bride or this graduate or this newborn infant. They also complain that they're materialistic, but again, what the heck is a wedding reception or a
Exactly.
graduation party? And of course, you can celebrate a birthday without
Without
gifts.
it being huge.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes as you get older, you're going, okay, we're not going to go with
Yeah.
that number. We'll wait for a little one further down the line.
The only other defense they can give why they don't celebrate birthdays is because they're pagan. But again, there's no, I don't get that, because why, you sing a song? Well, they play worldly music at receptions, rock and roll or swing or jazz, or blowing out the candles is pagan. Well, they allow wedding rings, you know? And fine, celebrate a birthday, but just don't put candles on a cake. Actually, that didn't even hit home to me until after I was married. And on my first anniversary, I went to my grandparents' house, and they had a small cake for us with a single candle on it. And I remember thinking, for 22 years, I thought that this was wrong, but it's only wrong if it's my birthday. I didn't really
That
get
is
that.
a very odd
And like I
doctrine.
mentioned, baby showers. You know, a baby shower is essentially the first birthday party. Here
Yeah.
it's born. Let's buy it diapers and onesies and all these gifts. But the subsequent anniversaries, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, it's just interesting
Yeah.
to see that you can find those areas where it's like, we're really firm on this, but the reasons are really fuzzy.
Yeah, I try to, you know, obviously as I was leaving the religion, I tried to figure out why do they really do this? You know, okay, maybe Christmas is steeped in pagan traditions, or maybe it's too materialistic, or, you know, or maybe Halloween is too satanic. But with birthdays, I just couldn't wrap my mind around any of the reasonings they gave were always so shaky.
The other thing that's interesting is that they're not politically active, and that I find interesting.
Yeah, we kind of touched on that because they think that the governments are Satan's instruments. And again, they respect governments, but they don't participate in it. No witness is sitting on your city council. They don't go vote either, which, you know, a lack of community spirit is too bad. But you could view it as good because they're against homosexuality. So they would definitely vote to curb any gay rights that were to come about. And also, I think that they would be fine with church and state intermingling as long as it was good for them. So.
Okay. So maybe that's a good thing on that. But the other thing when it comes to, you know, as far as medical services, they have an odd quirk about not accepting blood transfusions.
Yeah, that's another doctrine that's morphed through the years. Back in the 20s, they said no vaccines, no blood, and no organ transplants. Sometime before I was born, they decided vaccines were cool. And then sometime in the early 80s, I believe, they said you can do organ donations. But even just their stance on blood has constantly evolved. At one point when I was young, it was no blood at all. You can't take blood into your body. They based it on a scripture in Acts that said to abstain from blood. But by the year 2000, they were saying things like you can accept blood fractions. What did they say here? You can have fractions of white cells, fractions of platelets and plasma, but you have to stay away from the red blood cells. So it's difficult to understand that double standard, because in the Bible, you're supposed to show respect for the blood. Like it said, if they were to kill a creature to eat it, you were supposed to pour the blood out. Or if you were bleeding, your blood was supposed to be spilled out on the ground. Yet they can take blood fractions, which means they're fine with if other people donated blood and had their blood separated. And if they go in because they're sick and the doctor says, well, we need to draw some blood to see what you have, they're fine with that. They don't say, oh no, you pricked my finger, you pour it on the ground. So that's another one that always really got to me. And of course, they don't have to be vegetarians. Some are, but they don't have to be. So they're ingesting meat or blood just by ingesting meat. And if white blood cells are so bad, then they should be against nursing, because the thousands of white blood cells are transmitted that way. So that was another one that didn't make sense to me when I was a witness.
Yeah, and it sounds interesting that some rational science has crept in there, especially when they started accepting vaccines. They must have realized that, you know, maybe there is something to this, you know, vaccination.
Yeah, they've gotten in trouble before. Their children have gotten, there have been court orders forcing parents to submit to blood transfusions for their children. And some people who didn't get blood transfusions and then later died, their family members have tried to sue the Watchtower Society. So they've really gotten into trouble with that.
Okay, so and then there's some standard things that they are is when it comes to sexuality, gay sexuality, and abortion, they're fairly standard for your conservative religions on that.
They are, yep.
And then the no gambling and recreational drug use, except for our favorites of alcohol and caffeine.
Yeah, they do say enjoy alcohol in moderation.
Yep.
Caffeine, they are fine with having it with all the abandon you want. But they stay away from not only illegal substances, but also nicotine.
Okay.
I think in the early 70s, they basically said, if you do smoke, you have 6 months to stop smoking or you're out. So that included even this was before I was born, but that included even some of my relatives. So.
Okay, well, that's not a bad stand on that sort of thing.
I mean, I agreed with them growing up that alcohol should be observed in moderation and that there's really no need to consume nicotine, but I didn't like the hard line stance. Like, maybe I want to have a cigar when my son is born. Or if I do smoke, do I have to be cast out of the congregation? So I didn't like the hard line stance on that.
Yeah, that would do it that way. And, they've gone with the science of Earth's age and that kind of thing, which I think shows a little bit respect for science.
Yeah, they believe that there's no conflict between what the Bible says and the fact that that science says the Earth is billions of years old, that life has been here for millions of years, that the Earth goes around the sun. They're cool with all that. About the only areas of science that they do take issue with is they deny evolution. They believe that God made all the animals and plants as is at one point, and they at different points.
Okay.
They'll agree that maybe he made fish before he made birds. But they don't think that, this parrot evolved into this, I don't know, I can't even think of an example, but they just think they were all made in the species they are.
Okay.
And they also reject the age of humans. Humans were created about 4,030 years ago, and that was Adam, and then soon thereafter Eve. Those were the first two people. There were no humans or even people, or even species very similar to humans, such as Neanderthal before that.
That's going to make them looking at science very interesting. So, we've titled this program, How to Talk to a Jehovah's Witness. So you mentioned that, you would go out and proselytize.
Yeah.
So say we've got one at our doorstep and instead of chasing the way, we decide to talk. What approach do you take?
Well, do you want me to say what you shouldn't say if you would like to? Okay.
Let's start with the don'ts and then do the do's.
Well, don't say, I'll take your literature. Because witnesses, as a witness, we were taught to write down that address, write down everything we can remember. Okay, this was Scott, this was his address, he took this issue of the Watchtower, and I pointed out this article. So then I'm going to go back in 2 weeks. I talked to him Saturday morning at 11 a.m., so he's probably home Saturday morning, so that's when I'm going to come back and talk to him again. So if you take anything, even a small tract that's no larger than a smartphone, they will come back again to follow up on the interest. And if you say, I'm not interested, or I'm busy, that's no good either because they won't make a special point in coming back to you usually, but they'll come back again the next time they work that street. Or they might even say, well, when would be a good time? Or let me try again, Let's see, another thing you shouldn't say is, I have my own religion. People said that all the time, and we had a great response, and that response was pretty much, we would say it politely, but we would say in so many words, obviously you have your own religion. That's why we're here. If you were a Jehovah's Witness, you would be on this side of the door with me.
Okay, that's a pretty good approach to that one.
Another thing people would say is, I don't like you guys because you don't believe in Jesus. And that is false. They're not Trinitarians, so they don't think Jesus is equal to God, but they do believe that Jesus is a God, that he's divine, that he came to earth, that he died for us, and that he is a powerful deity in heaven.
Okay.
Something else people would say is they would say my parent or my spouse or my roommate isn't here, and they don't care. They just want people to come into a knowledge of their religion or to accept their religion. So if they knock on a house and it's the maid, that's cool. They still think she deserves a chance at their truth.
Okay.
The only time they'll maybe ask for someone else is if it's definitely a young child, But if you're 12 years old, I would say, or older, then you're gold to them. They'll talk to you.
Okay.
Yeah. If you say that you don't believe in Jesus or you don't think the end is coming soon, again, they're fine with that because that's why they came. Hey, we know you don't, or we know that you probably don't, so that's why we're offering this.
We're out to give you information.
Yeah. Another one, I heard the infidel guy say this on a podcast once, is he said that a good way to get rid of them is to say, well, you guys only think 144,000 are going to heaven, right? Well, then you don't want me to join up because then I'll be fighting for you for space.
One of your slots,
but
yes.
As you remember from what we talked about earlier, they think those spots are pretty much taken up, but everyone
Okay.
else is going to live forever on Earth, and they don't care if it's 5 billion or 10 billion or 10 billion and one people. It's
Okay.
not up to them. So.
Okay, so those are all great things on knowing what's the wrong answer
Yeah.
to their questions. Then what are some of the right answers that would either throw them off or politely send them off?
About the only thing you can say, well, you could say that you're going to contact the authorities, especially if you have a no trespassing sign or a no soliciting sign. They think they're exempt from that, but you could threaten them with the authorities. But if you don't want to be a jerk, you could just politely say, please add me to your do not call list. And they divide the city up into little pieces called territories.
Okay.
So if you live in a neighborhood, they probably have like a 4-block stretch that they have on this little card that they check out, almost like books from a library.
Okay.
And they work those streets. But on the back, they have a list of people who have said, don't come here at all. And they really respect that list because sometimes the people might be violent, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe they're afraid that it could result in some sort of abuse on them or even on a spouse. Maybe their spouse used to be a witness and now
Okay.
they're really against it. So if you say, add me to your do not call list, they will write your address down and say, okay, just to make sure you're Scott, you live at 123 Main Street, we won't come anymore, and they'll put that in the sheet for you.
Okay, so that's a good approach there. Are they open then, just out of curiosity, because I have gone to different services, to having people show up and check out a service, or is those pretty closed and you need to pass a few steps?
No, you're welcome to go into their kingdom halls, they call their churches, anytime and listen. They won't come to yours. Same thing at the door. You're welcome to take whatever literature you want. They won't take any of yours.
Okay.
If they perceive that it's totally secular and of no threat, they might take it. Like if you say, will you accept this Rand McNally Atlas or this Betty Crocker cookbook? But they won't take anything that seems religious.
Okay.
So
You can't go with the non-track thing. So what's just our last takeaway? We're down just to the last seconds
well, I would say
here.
if they do come to your door and you do want to talk to them, be my guest. But if you do want to talk to them, here's some things you can do. Don't talk to them about the Bible because they obviously think they're the final authority. But ask them about science,
Okay.
especially about the age of humans or about evolution, because
Okay.
all they know about it is what they've been taught from the Watchtower Society. And if that was all I knew, I wouldn't accept evolution either because it's a very skewed, distorted picture of it. But
Of
if you
course.
present them with some of the facts and evidence, or if you don't want to get that deep, if you yourself don't feel that comfortable talking about a deep topic, ask them about shunning. That makes them
Okay.
very uncomfortable. They say they are a loving religion, that they follow Christ, that they follow the golden rule. And to shun people, even their own children or parents, seems just the antithesis of that. So ask them, who do you shun? Why do you shun that person? Is it because they left the religion? What evil did they do? Well, maybe they did do some evil, but maybe it's just that they smoke, or they agree with the facts of evolution, or they're homosexual. So what's really so bad about them that you shun them?
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for being on the program.
Yeah, no
It's
problem,
been
Scott.
an interesting chat about this. So for more information on us, the Humanists of Minnesota, you can go to our website at humanistofmn.org. We'd like to hear what you think about this program and some topics you'd like us to cover on future programs. You can contact us through the website, send us an email, or you can mail us an old-fashioned letter. We'd really like to get one of those sometime. So do that. The address is at the end of the program and on our website. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this edition of Humanist Views. I'm Scott Lohman. Good night.